Hello, friends. Turn in your Bible to 2 Corinthians 1, verses 8 through 11. As you turn there, I want to ask this question. What's the hardest thing you've had to deal with during this time of shutdown? Some people in our society barely notice that anything changed. Those are probably the ones who are rich enough that they don't have to work, they've got a bunker in the middle of nowhere, or they live on a boat in the Caribbean by themselves half the year anyway. But for the grand majority of us, there have been some rather difficult times these last 9 to 10 weeks. Perhaps you've been under financial stress. The loss of a job or the loss of income from a business have brought about a disappointing reversal of fortune, and the stress has begun to mount. Or maybe the worst part hasn't been financial or stressful in that way. Maybe the worst part is more of a personal stress. Maybe there's been grief over graduation ceremonies not taking place, or wedding plans that have been delayed or scrapped or massively changed. Vacations have been and will continue to be altered significantly. School is far different for everyone. And funerals? I've had the privilege of performing a few funerals during coronavirus. These were not people in the church who died, but neighbors in our community, and I did these funerals for different reasons. In the one case, the gentleman who died had no local church, but had a relationship with me, and so his family asked me to do the funeral. In the other case, the funeral home called me to seek a substitute minister. The gentleman who died had been a member of a different local church, but their pastor is on the high-risk category and was uncomfortable doing a funeral and being in crowds during a pandemic time. And in both cases, I joyfully accepted, knowing that I would have the opportunity to preach the gospel to people who may otherwise never hear it. Why do I bring this up? Because I've had close personal experience of knowing that funerals during the last 3 months have been particularly tragic. Many family members, even close family, cannot attend these funerals due to crowd size restrictions. Physical contact is prohibited, keeping relatives from hugging or fully expressing their grief and comforting each other. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. Even if you haven't had that exact grief, this time has been plenty whacked out with stress. I mean, even grocery shopping has been stressful. You have to wear a mask, you have to wipe down the cart handles, interacting with checkout clerks in their little aquarium bubbles. There's a lot of stress there. And the stress of the situation takes its toll. We feel it. It's practically in the air we breathe and the food we eat. We're fed a steady diet of panic from the media, and when we go in public, there's this overmastering sense of suspicion and fear. Does she have the coronavirus? If I talk to him too long, will I get the Rona? Oh no, she touched me. That child coughed. Spray him down with Lysol. Unclean. It beats us down. We are excited that restrictions have begun to lift, but there's always a question in the back of our minds. What if there's another wave? What if it gets worse? What if we have to shut down again? Are you stressed? Many of us can say yes, absolutely, definitely. A few perhaps feel like you've had very little reason to be stressed compared to others, but you still feel stressed, and maybe you're getting stressed for feeling a little guilty for feeling stressed. Let's face it. These last many weeks have been a national trauma. It's okay to be stressed because of the significant trauma we've all gone through. But let me ask, what are you doing with that stress? When stressed, some people push it down or ignore it or medicate it away with work, alcohol, drugs, or some other kind of addictive behavior. That's bad. Retreating to such things may make you feel good for a moment, but you know that the problem gets worse. Others of us just deny the problem entirely, sometimes with sanctified nonsense. Consider this statement: God will not give you more than you can handle. That's a favorite statement of American Christianity. And we say it all the time. We put it on little trinkets and hang it from our rearview mirrors in our cars. We use this statement as a way to try to comfort or encourage other people. But then we wonder why so many people are not comforted or encouraged by it. Why are they not? Isn't it a good thing to think that God will not give you more than you can handle? It would be good news. if it were true. But what if it's not true? What if it's an idea that we like, but it doesn't teach us something accurate about God? And where can you find that idea in the Bible, after all? It's not there. It sounds spiritual, but it's still just nonsense. Instead, what we find is verses like 2 Corinthians 1, verses 8 through 11. In this passage, Paul gives us a testimony about himself and what God is doing. It's a testimony that completely destroys the statement, God will not give you more than you can handle. Let's read it together. 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 through 11. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about the hardships we suffered in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired even of life. Indeed, in our hearts we felt the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us. On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us, as you help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many. We were under great pressure, he says, far beyond our ability to endure. To put that another way, God gave him more than he could handle. Let me say that again so we hear it. God gave Paul more than he could handle. But he did it for a reason. So where does that statement, God will not give you more than you can handle, where does it even come from if it's not found in the Bible? Well, it's actually a misquoting or a misapplication of 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, which says, God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will provide a way out so that you can stand up under it. But we might notice something straight away as we read that. The verse is not about whether or not God will allow great suffering or stress in our lives. It's about temptation and God restricting temptation so that we might resist temptation. I think God keeps that promise always. We can stand up under temptation because he helps us, but I think God often does allow suffering in our lives that is far beyond what we can handle. He allows emotional suffering. He allows physical suffering. He brings challenges to us that we cannot win on our own. He confronts us with problems we simply don't have the ability to solve on our own. Do you know why I believe that is true? Because that's what the Bible teaches. Unfortunately, we so often don't want to hear what it tells us because we want to think that we can handle anything that life throws at us. We want to think that we are rugged and strong and self-sufficient, needing nothing and no one. But the Bible shows us a very different picture if we pay attention. Consider just a few stories, right? Remember the story of Job. He lost everything. His house, his wealth, his children, his health. All he had left was a nagging wife who told him to just die already, and a couple friends who told him that his suffering was all his fault. I mean, that's not cool. Listen to what he says in Job 17. Job says, my spirit is broken. My days are cut short. The grave awaits me. Surely mockers surround me. My eyes must dwell on their hostility. My days have passed. My plans are shattered, and so are the desires of my heart. If the only home I hope for is the grave, if I spread out my bed in darkness, if I say to corruption, you are my father, and to the worm, my mother or my sister, where then is my hope? Who can see any hope for me? I don't think Job was a whiner. I think, based on the loss and his shattered, broken life, I think he was suffering more than he was able to bear. And Job isn't the only one. Remember the prophet Jeremiah. He was abused, imprisoned, and disbelieved by those that he was warning. He had to suffer through the destruction of Jerusalem, seeing the city and the home he loved brought to ruin. He wrote Lamentations as a result. That's a very aptly named book. And he wrote this there. My eyes fail from weeping. I am in torment within. My heart is poured out on the ground because my people are destroyed, because children and infants faint in the street. They say to their mothers, 'Where is bread and wine?' And they faint like wounded men in the streets of the city as their lives ebb away in their mother's arms. What can I say for you? With what can I compare you, O daughter of Jerusalem? To what can I liken you, that I may comfort you, O virgin daughter of Zion? Your wound is as deep as the sea. Who can heal you?" That's funny, right? Funny how Jeremiah doesn't comfort these women and their children by saying, "Hey, cheer up, God will not give you more than you can handle." Instead, he says, "I have been deprived of peace. I have forgotten what prosperity is. So I say, my splendor is gone, and all that I had hoped from the Lord." Those are just two stories from the Bible. There are countless others. You can remember the widow of Zarephath who loses her son and cries out in despair. She is not strong enough to bear it, and no human aid could help her now. Likewise, the Shunammite woman also loses her son and goes to Elisha in bitter distress and, it says, bereft of hope. What are they told? Are any who suffer greatly in the scriptures ever told God will not give you more than you can handle? No. Instead, the Bible has a much different message of hope for those who suffer. In fact, it does say at times, just like in 2 Corinthians 1:8, that life can be hard and that there's great pressure that can be beyond your ability to endure. Life just might bring you to despair. Paul said these words, "Indeed, in our hearts we felt the sentence of death." Paul knows this, right? He suffered amazingly. This is his account of his suffering. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I have been constantly on the move. I have been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my own countrymen, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false brothers. I have labored and toiled and gone about often without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have often gone without food. I have been cold and naked. The suffering of Paul is unmatched. But these words that we just read in 2 Corinthians 1, verses 8 and 9, are more powerful in my view than his specific list of what he suffered. Here he still simply states plainly that what he suffered was more than he could handle. Well, how about you? Do you carry a suffering or a stress that you cannot handle? Is there a grief weighing down your heart, and are you terrified that the pastor or maybe someone else in the church would minimize the pain in your heart by telling you, "Cheer up, buckaroo, you can handle it," when you very well know that you cannot? If you're there, let me tell you something. You're in good company. Paul couldn't handle his sufferings either. It was more than he could endure. But Paul did not stay in despair. He had hope yet. Now, you may very well be brought to the end of yourself, but the end of yourself is only the beginning of what God can do. Why does it happen? Why? That's a very good question if it's honest. And when we suffer, we often want to know why. Paul was given more than he could endure. So is Jeremiah. So is Job and those women that we mentioned. Perhaps you're there right now. Why, God? I can't handle this. Why has this happened? There is an answer that the Bible gives. And the Bible gives it to us here in 2 Corinthians 1:9. It says, "This happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead." God does not allow us to suffer because he's cruel or indifferent. No, God is not cruel. He wants to bring us somewhere. He wants to bring us, firstly, to the end of ourselves. You see, as long as Paul thought that he could handle his suffering, he doesn't need God when he suffers. When we tell people God will not give you more than you can handle, we are telling them you can handle anything. We are telling them you're strong enough, big enough, powerful enough to do anything. And if nothing ever could come along that we can't handle, then we are really self-sufficient. And if we are self-sufficient, then who needs God? But this happened, we are told, that we might not rely on ourselves. It's always our temptation to rely on ourselves. It's always our first impulse to assume that we can simply live life apart from any other help, and certainly without help from God. But in the school of life, great suffering is the teacher that reminds us how little we can actually do. We need that reminder because in truth, we are not big, we are small. We are not strong, we are weak. We are not rich, we are poor. So if we rely on ourselves, if we go through life under the delusion that we can handle anything and everything, then one day we will be confronted by the truth, and the truth will not be very pleasant. We might think we can handle life. We might believe that we can save ourselves. We might presume that there's nothing that can stand in our way. And we might repeat meaningless words like, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. But reality is not going to bend itself to our delusions. The universe will not change because we think we can handle it. We can't. We're just not big enough. We are children, thinking that we can stop the storm simply by singing, rain, rain, go away, come again some other day. We are, after all, a small boat in a big and dangerous sea. And at any moment, a wave might come along and overturn us. No matter how good of a sailor we are, we can't survive the tsunami. The great might of the ocean will overturn us. Our boat is so small. The sea is so big. So the coronavirus comes, blows by, and ruins the economy, wrecks our health, kills our friends, transforms our culture, and who knows what else. How can we stand in the face of such power? We're just not big enough. God knows it. We ought to know it. We can't rely on ourselves. We are not self-sufficient. We need God. And God will come through. Verse 10 says, He has delivered us, and He will deliver us. We can't rely on ourselves, but we can rely on God. Remember, He is the God who raises the dead. What could possibly be too hard for Him? There was a day when all seemed lost. Remember that. In every human estimation, there was a day when it seemed that there was no longer any hope. Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, had died. He was dead and it was over. Nothing more could be done from our perspective. There was no human effort, no human strength, no amount of wealth or activity that could possibly change the hopeless situation. Jesus was dead, and it seemed like life was certainly more than we could handle. But though humans could do nothing, God can and does still do anything. The first day of the week comes, that first Easter Sunday. The darkness begins to dissipate. The women came to the tomb very early and they find it empty. They were in a hopeless place, but now hope has sparked to life again. God raises the dead. Jesus is alive. And if God raised Jesus, He will also raise to life all those who belong to Jesus. Our hope is found in Him and in Him alone. We might be unfaithful. God is always faithful. We are powerless. He is mighty to save. We are dead. He is the one who raises the dead. That's what we live to celebrate every day. Life just might throw more at us than we can handle. That's okay, because there is nothing that He cannot handle. He has delivered us in the past. He brought Jesus back from the dead, securing our forgiveness from sin and our redemption. And He has saved us time and time again in our own lives. He saved Paul even when Paul knew there was nothing he could do to save himself. And if we will simply see it, we would acknowledge how frequently He has also saved us time and time again. And He will save us in the future. This is the God we serve. He is the God who calms the storm, who heals the sick, who gives sight to the blind. He is the God who sends rain to end the drought, who multiplies food to feed the multitude, who rescues his people from the power of the enemy. God causes the lame to walk, the deaf to hear, and cures the leper. Our God preaches good news to the poor, casts out demons, walks on water, parts the sea, sends manna from heaven, water from a rock, commands fish to be caught, ends deadly pandemics, heals racial divides, and he raises the dead. So what do we have to fear? Our hope is not in ourselves. Hope is not found in our wisdom or our planning. Hope is not found in the strength of our arm or in the might of our abilities or the strength of our will. Our hope is not in our investments or in the power that we have accumulated. All such things are simply phantom strengths, or they'll just fail us sooner or later. No, on him we set our hope, and he will continue to deliver us. He brought Jesus back from the dead, the testimony to all people everywhere that this life is not about what we might do, but rather about what he has done. We can't trust ourselves. We can trust him. He raises the dead. Turn to Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30. God just might give you more than you can handle. But it is never more than he can handle. He raises the dead. And so when he accomplishes more than our weakness or our foolishness ever could, when he heals through our brokenness, when in our darkness his light shines, then he gets the glory. Therefore we don't despair. We don't lose heart, but on him we set our hope. Do you want hope today? Have you encountered something that's beyond your ability to endure? Have you let yourself come to the end of yourself? Is the stress just mounting in your life and you don't know where to put it? Well, it's time no longer to rely on yourself. Don't rely on your job, your money, your strength, your ability, your government, your determination, your effort. None of that will save you. The Bible tells you you're just not big enough. But it also tells you that God is. He raises the dead and we can rely on him. Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30 say this. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The weariness of life is real. The burden is real. The rest that God offers is also real. We rest upon the God who raises the dead. Will you trust him today? And will you let him carry you through the storm?